Hello everybody and welcome, I'm Andrei, and today I'm here in my studio to show you something that I hope you will find interesting and useful. In the previous videos of this series, we talked about no input techniques and how to create feedbacks in different type of devices, like for example mixers and guitar pedals. But first of all, as usual, a warning. If you watched the previous videos of this series, you heard it quite a few times, but it's always important to remember that you have to be careful with the volumes, since we are speaking about feedback and no input techniques. They can change drastically in a split of a second and they are very loud. Don't connect your no input setup directly to your speakers or your earphones. I suggest to use different levels of gain staging, like for example in this case I'm using a mixer and then an audio interface, so I have two different levels of control of the volumes. Or you can use, for example, a limiter and a compressor, something in between your speakers, your earphones and your no input setup. In this way you will avoid damaging your speakers, your earphones and especially your ears. In the previous episode we talked about no input and feedback inside of different type of devices, like for example mixers and guitar pedals. In this episode we are going to focus on a specific piece of gear, which is this one. This is a graphic equalizer in a rack format, and we are gonna discover how we can use it and how we can create feedback and generate sound inside of the circuit of this piece of gear. This graphic equalizer is a model from the 70s, so obviously it's a second-hand unit, as most of the stuff that I have here in my studio. There is a reason why I decided to buy mainly second-hand devices and musical instruments. The first one is practical, because some of these instruments are pretty cheap and you can find them pretty easily. But of course there is also an ethical reason. I think that reusing and giving new life to devices and to musical instruments, it's something really important on an ethical level. But also there is a sentimental side in this choice. Used instruments have a story. They are unique and sometimes you don't know what's their origin, and every time my mind likes to imagine where they come from and who used them and where and how. But of course, sometimes you can discover a lot on their origin. And that's the case of this equalizer. The guy who sold it to me told me that it was part of the studio of an amazing percussionist and composer called Andrea Centazzo. He was active since the beginning of the 70s and he played with some of the greatest avant-garde musicians in the US scene, like for example John Zorn, Don Cherry, Alvin Curran and many others. So yeah, this is basically a piece of history. But now back to our no input setup. This equalizer has two different channels. Channel 1 that you can see here and channel 2 that you can see here. There are 15 bands for every channel, and then you have a master volume control for both of them. It's pretty simple, pretty basic, but it's super interesting for no input techniques. Here on the back you have two inputs and two outputs, so we can create a feedback loop inside of this circuit. One of the two outputs, it's connected to my main mixer there, and the three other inputs and outputs can be used to create a feedback loop. I'm gonna add also a couple of splitters, mono splitters, so we can create more complex type of setups. Let's turn the unit on. There is a sound. Now we can use all these different EQ bands to shape the sound of our feedback. That's nice. We can create and shape the tone and the timbre of our feedback in a very precise way. That's super nice. You can hear the modulation that happens inside of the circuit right now. That's great. That's super, super nice. Cool. And now I'm using just the first channel. The second one is connected in a way that we can shape the sound of this first feedback and filter it. Obviously the master volume knob here controls the pitch of the feedback. That's super interesting, and you can use this rack unit in many different ways. It's basically an oscillator and you have a lot of control. But what if we had a couple of effects to this oscillator to make it more interesting? Listen to this drone for a long time actually. Wow. This is the perfect drone machine, actually. Anyway, we can create a more complex setup if, for example, we add some other rack units, second-hand ones, cheap digital multi-effects from the early 2000s that I found in the last years during my work with feedback techniques. Now I created a pretty random patch here. I don't know exactly what is going where, but that's also part of the fun, obviously. I'm using the sound source of the feedback, pass it through our Equalizer, a multi-effect. This is a digital reverb and multi-effect. This is another digital reverb and multi-effect. So let's see what happens when we turn on our Equalizer. Yeah, the possibilities are really countless, even if I don't exactly know what I'm doing here in terms of patching. It's always interesting to explore all these unpredictable possibilities of no input and feedback techniques, even in a setup that you don't know exactly how it works. But yeah, now we are close to the end of the video, so it's time to make some music with what we discovered today. And that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video and it was useful in a certain way to explore different type of setups and give you some ideas on how to create feedbacks in different type of devices. Thanks everyone for tuning in and see you soon somewhere out there. Bye!